Hello again, I'm Dan Ware. My guest for this segment is someone whom I suspect is familiar to many of you. I'm very pleased to have with me Larry Dixon, who is the owner and the manager of Sullivan's Department Store. Larry has been in the retail clothing business in downtown Franklin for about 4 decades now, so I thought it might be interesting to reminisce with Larry a little bit about how the community has changed over the years and how it's stayed the same. Larry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on today, Dan.
Am I right about that 4 decades in business?
You are exactly right. July the 26th of this year, I just spent my 41st year
41.
at the same location, same doors, and it's been good.
Well, that's probably something close to a record. I mean, that's pretty much a working career there. Are you from Franklin originally? Did you grow up here?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I was born out on 31W by what used to be the park out there. The house right up behind it is exactly where I was born, Dan.
Yeah, on the out toward Peden Mill.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It used to be a log house. It's been torn down, and a brick house stands there now, and I'm not sure who owns that house, but that's exactly where I was
born. So I guess you went to school here in this?
I did. I graduated from here, sure did.
Okay. Have fond memories, I guess, of the old high school days?
I have lots of fond memories. I actually went to high school down on 31W North here.
Up on the hill.
Up on the hill,
right.
That's right. Mr. Dunn was my principal through my high school years there.
Now, did you land a job while you were still in high school, or?
I actually did. I actually graduated at the end of May, and I was walking across the street one day, and Glenn Malone came up behind me and just kind of punched me on the back, and he said, "You wouldn't be interested in a job working at Sullivan's, would you?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I have no idea, but I said I'd be glad to talk with you."
I see.
And on the street that day, we made an appointment to get together, and in a couple of days, I got with him, and he hired me, and I went to work in the men's department, and with Billy Watland. Billy Watland was still there at that time, and Billy and I ran the men's department, so that's when I started. That's where I started, and when I started.
And that was the same location where you are today?
It's the exact location. Actually, Dan, they were moving from where Simpson County Bank is today, the main location. That was actually the National Stores.
Okay.
And they were moving from that location to the present location, and it became Sullivan's just a short time after that.
Okay.
And that's when I started working for them.
Where did the name Sullivan's come from?
The name Sullivan's came from the old Hickory store. A fellow by the name of Pat Sullivan managed that store, and that's where Sullivan's got its name, was from the old Hickory store at that time. Sullivan's was known to be better merchandise. It was a step up in merchandise, the grade of merchandise. So there were several stores that remained to be national stores, but there were 8 or 10 stores that graded up that became Sullivan stores. Okay. And Franklin was one of those.
So when we became a Sullivan's here, was there no longer a national stores in
Yes,
Franklin?
Not in Franklin.
Okay,
not in Franklin,
but in
Kentucky,
other locations that name was still used?
In some other locations, it continued to be used until they closed.
I see. Well, you mentioned Billy Watland. You all worked together, and then you all competed with one another for a while.
You're right. Billy and I worked together for 5 years. Billy Watland was a very good merchant. So was Glenn Malone. Right. And I am very, very fortunate, Dan, that I had the opportunity to work under both of those people. I would have to say that when Billy left, he invited me or asked me if I would like to come and work with him. And at the same time, Glenn Malone offered me a better opportunity and a job raised at that time, so I continued to stay where I am, and I have never regretted that to this day.
Well, now, did Mr. Malone, did he have part ownership of the store? Was he was just in a managerial capacity?
He and Ms. Malone simply managed the store for, at that time, what was called National Stores Corporation. And they were based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And National Stores Corporation was actually owned by DC Apparel, which was also located in Nashville.
I see. And do you have any idea how long they had a store in Franklin as a National Stores? Had that been around for a while before the change to Sullivan's?
Yes, sir. National Stores was originated in Franklin, Kentucky in 1929.
Ah.
It sure did.
So that's a long history.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, now, ultimately, you came to buy the store here, did you not? Aren't you the owner
That is right.
Now?
Just to give you a little bit of background, when Billy left, I became the manager of the men's department, and that was the position that he held at that time. So I was made manager of the men's department, and then 2 or 3, and also buyer for the men's department.
Right.
And 3 or 4 years later, Ms. Malone came to me and she said, you could help me do some ladies buying also. And she said, would you like to go to some markets with me to learn ladies?
Yeah.
And I did. So I did that with her in that capacity until Mr. Malone died July the 6th of 1973. And the week after he was buried, I was made manager of the complete store at that time. And I continued managing the whole store and buying for the store until 1988, at which time I bought the store.
I see. Did you, of course, by 1988, the large shopping malls had come into their own, and I'm sure that makes competing more difficult for the small town merchant. Did you have any trepidation about taking the plunge and actually becoming the owner?
Well, Dan, yes and no. I knew what I had when I bought it, and on the other hand, I think when you go in debt that much, you do think about it, and that was a big debt at that time. And the thing that I realized, though, and you are exactly right, Walmart came in and they caused a lot of changes in Franklin and on the downtown square. The one thing that I realized real quickly, that you can't compete with them, and you learn to have to find your niche that you can stay in business with, and so far I have been able to do that. And one of the things that I learned a long time ago in the retail business, you have to learn to change with change.
Can't, or if you get left behind, then you got to keep up. Yeah.
You will get left behind if you don't.
Well, let's look behind a little bit. I know my father used to tell me that in, I guess, the late 40s throughout the 50s, that the thing to do was to go to town in Franklin on Saturday, that we were maybe more rural then, and I grew up living out in the country, and Saturday was a big trading day. By the time you came into the business, was that still true, or had that started to taper off?
Dan, when I came into the business, when I first came in, on Saturday, it was shoulder to shoulder on the streets. The courthouse benches were full, and we stayed open until 8 o'clock that night. I mean, we came in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were there until 8 o'clock that night. And it was constant business in the stores, constant business. That didn't really start changing until really the late 60s, early 70s. You begin to see things starting to taper off, and of course the malls became a lot more prevalent at that time, and of course that has been, the malls took a lot of people from the downtown businesses, and not only business-wise, but the people went to, and they went to the malls, and
well,
so that has waned as far as the number of people at one time.
Right. Of course, during that time period, we got more factory jobs in, and factories will work 3 shifts. You had more opportunities for people to work a second or a third shift, and I wonder if that might have affected shopping patterns. As for, when you worked on the farm, Saturday was kind of your day off, at least noon Saturday, and the factories don't work that way.
You were exactly right, Dan. I remember when I started working at the store, the only factory we had at that time was Potter and Brumfield, and the Link Company was coming in at that time. And those were the 2 factories that we had, and we didn't have much industry at that time. So, yes, industry has brought about a lot of change in our downtown. I think it really has, and it's been for the good. It's all been for the good in that sense. People have had more money to spend. People have got automobiles now, and they can travel and do travel and go easily wherever they choose to and want to.
That building that you are in there at the corner of Main and Cedar, before it was a clothing store, it was a hotel, was it not?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It was the Franklin Hotel, and that building, the original building that was there before this building burned, and this building that now stands there was completed in 1929, Dan.
29.
And it was advertised, and it is a fireproof building. It's also a fallout shelter approved building. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not.
No,
but
I didn't know that.
It was the only building in town that was fallout shelter approved.
That's in the basement area?
That's in the basement area. That's correct.
Okay.
And it is advertised, and it truly is the only, well, I'm not sure about now, but at that time, it was advertised as the only fireproof hotel between Louisville and Nashville, Tennessee.
Really? Okay. And did it operate as a hotel until National Stores moved in and became Sullivan's, or were there other businesses in between?
It ceased to be a hotel in 1960. That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Now, it housed 3 other businesses underneath where my store is.
Okay, the lobby wasn't the whole area that you now have. There were other things.
That's right.
What was there?
The Franklin Utilities was one business that was there, and then Bennett and Smith Clothing Store was in there, and I believe A&P was on. I'm not real sure about that.
I remember being in the A&P,
but I believe A&P was in a portion of that building at one time also.
Well, think back, and when you started working there, kind of in your mind's eye, go down Main Street, go north. Think about what other businesses were there at that time, and how many, if any, of those businesses are still there today?
Well, I can name most of them.
Okay.
Sugart and Willis was next door, and they remained there for several years.
Right.
Then the Coons, not Coons, but Bentleys.
Bentleys, yes.
5 and 10 was was on down below them. And
I
then
used to like to go down in the basement of that building, and they had fascinating toys and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then Rip Law had a pool hall where the Trophy Fin shop is now. I believe that's correct.
Yes.
And then right below that was the Draper and Darwin store. And then on the end was a restaurant, and I'm trying to think of the name of that right now, and it doesn't come to me. But, and in between that, I can't remember exactly what was in the building between the restaurant and Draper and Darwin, but most of them I can remember.
You're talking about the restaurant on the corner. I think this would have been before you started to work, but when we had Leon Page on here, he told me about running a business in there called the Sweet Shop.
That's correct.
And before he got into the banking business, he ran that.
That is correct, Dan.
But I guess by the time you went to work, Franklin Bank and Trust had started, and Leon had probably gone on to that.
Franklin Bank and Trust had just started over on the south side of the square where the county court clerk's office is now. Yes, it had.
And then as you went around the corner there, which was, I guess, the main corner of town, you had some stores, I guess, you competed with that were right across Cedar Street and diagonally across Main. Am I right about that?
You are
Young's,
exactly right.
Lurman's?
Young's department store was on the corner, and then we had across the other corner was Lurman Brothers. Mr. Birdwhistle managed that store. Then on up where the rentway is now, that was Coons 5 and 10, and then of course Moore's Drug Store, and then you went on up, and Ford's Furniture Store was where Simpson County, where Simpson County Bank's main location is right now, and then of course Gillespie's.
Right on the corner there.
On the corner. Yes, I remember all those stores, and they were thriving stores, Dan. They were thriving stores at that time.
I'm sure you knew the people who worked and managed those other stores.
I did.
Did you feel like you all were cutthroat competitors, or did you feel like, well, yeah, we're sort of in competition, but we all live in the same place? I mean, how did you get along with all the folks around the square?
I never, ever remember one problem in any way, Dan. I think what we all tried to do was take care of the customers we had at the time we had them. And I think that's probably what all the other merchants tried to do. And, you know, believe it or not, we were competitors, but we all had a different line to offer. So we, in the sense that we were competitors, we also, none of us carried the same merchandise. So I think that's what made it real unique, that the customers that came to Franklin did have a choice of lines and quality and maybe just their particular favorite spot to shop.
So you sort of knew what the other fella was going to have, what lines of apparel,
we did.
And you tended not to buy the same stuff.
We respected that as much as we knew how.
I see.
And when you went to markets, you never knew when you might overlap a line with someone else, and occasionally you did. I know probably we all had era shirts on the street,
because
and but that was just a real standard, Dan.
Well,
and maybe a few other lines, but not very many did we repeat.
When you go to buy clothes to sell, is do you buy differently if you are in a smaller city than you would if you were in a larger city, or is it the same across the country, and whatever is going to be in the Northeast and in California is going to be in this part of the country, or are there regional distinctions?
Dan, that's a very good question, and there are original distinctions. What you have to do, and this is what I try to do, and this is what I've tried to do all my life in the retail business. I try to, if you will listen, your customers will let you know what they need. And what you try to do as a buyer is listen to what your customers are asking for and calling for, and be sensitive to that, and buy as close as you know how to do that. You've heard, I'm sure, the adage that you have to buy right to sell right. There is no truer statement ever been made than that statement right there. You've sure got to buy it right. You've got to buy the right mix. You've got to buy the looks. You've got to spread the sizes. You've got to spread the categories. There's a whole lot to buying.
And you don't learn that overnight, I'm sure. That it takes a few years to know what to do on all those areas, right?
There are no truer words ever been spoken than what you just said, because honestly, I would hate to be back where I was 40 years ago and buy a store and know that I had to do all the buying for it and know as little as I knew then. If I have
back then, you probably didn't realize what you didn't know, did you?
That's exactly right. And if there's anything that I have learned over the years, I have learned the buying. And truthfully, I could be a lot of help to young buyers going into the market today, because there's a lot I could teach them and a lot I could tell them.
From 40 years of experience.
And that's not to pat myself on the back, but
No.
you said it well a few moments ago. Some things come with experience, and that's one thing that does.
Well, when I grew up here in the late 60s, along about that time and in the early 70s, some of the fashions got pretty outlandish as far as what you would see on television. You know, we sort of had the hippie culture and all of that. Did that make its way into your store, or was that more of a big city phenomenon?
That was more of a big city phenomenon. It really was. I guess the closest we ever got to it was maybe some of the striped bell-bottom pants, and that's probably as close as we ever got to that, Dan.
Yeah.
Although speaking of trends, right now our trends in the fashions today are somewhat back to the look of the late 60s and the early 70s. So that history does repeat itself.
It does repeat itself, yeah.
And right now that is somewhat of a trend that we're in right now. It's the late 60s and early 70s.
Right. But isn't there a sort of more or less classic look that pretty much stays true and doesn't follow the trends? You know, I mean, as far as men's dress clothes, suits now aren't a whole lot different than suits were many years ago, are they?
Dan, you're exactly right. There's always a classic look, and that's where your bread and butter is, and that's the mainstream that you need to always stay in. The classic look it's always been here, it will always be here. And what you do, you buy some of your fashion trends to feed off of the classic trends. And you've got to always have your Chevrolets and Fords, but you can buy a few Cadillacs to mix in there with it occasionally, and that's
how important is that display window in the front of the store and attracting the eye of the passers-by? How important is that?
It's very important, and it's very important. That we spend a lot of time and a lot of thought when we're doing those windows, because we know that every day there are hundreds of people driving by seeing those windows, and we try to put our very best foot forward on each window we put in. And when we put our windows in, we try to put a little bit of creativity in with them also, Dan, to show the merchandise and attract people to people's eye to the windows. And
typically, how often would you change the display over the course of, say, a year?
We try to change our windows out every 2 to 3 weeks.
That often?
That often, yes, we do. Yes, we do. There's so much merchandise in the store that we try to get as many looks as possible in for people to be able to see what is in the store.
Now, over the years, in the summertime, there's been a Sidewalk Days promotion, and I know you all still did it this year. Does that pique the interest it once did, or is that not as big a deal? I know you and other merchants have continued that tradition, so it must have some value, or you wouldn't be continuing to do it.
Dan, it's very good for us. It's very good for us for several reasons. Number one, it gives us an opportunity to mark down our spring and summer merchandise to give the customer a really good value, and they are getting a really good value at that point. And then also, while they're getting a good value, it helps us to turn some dollars and to clean out our stock to get ready for the fall merchandise coming in. And yes, it is. It has lots of value. And truthfully, sidewalk sales for us are as good as they've ever been. I could honestly say from the very first ones we had to the one we just had this past July, they've all been very good, and they continue to be.
Well, good.
So it's a good thing.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere that for most retailers, the last quarter of the year, the weeks leading up to Christmas, are far and away the busiest time of the year, and most of your profits are going to be made in that quarter compared to the others. Is that a true statement, or does that vary?
That's a very true statement. That's a very true statement. I think you would find any retailer in the clothing business to tell you that if they can just keep their necks above water till November, if there's any money to be made, you make it in November and December, Dan.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. If there's any to be made, that's when you make it. And that's why you see us work so hard toward the fall of the year, getting ready for Christmas open house and going forward into Christmas, because that's our time. And we need that time.
And if that was true 40 years ago and true today, it'll probably be true 40 years from now.
That has not changed, Dan. Right. That has not changed. It seems like that people, when they don't buy clothes any other time of the year, they're willing to spend money at Christmas time and buy gifts for others. And so we're thankful for that time of year.
Right. And as we get closer to that time, I'm sure that we'll be doing our part to make people aware of open house, extended hours, or whatever. But as warm as it's been the last few days, it's hard to think about November. And we're taping this a few days before the car show. And last week I had a couple of gentlemen that belonged to the car club on. They were sitting over there where you were sitting. And I asked them about the history of that show. And they said that this is the 40th year. The first few years they held it over at Barren River State Park, and then they moved it to downtown Franklin. I wonder if you could tell me from your perspective what was involved in getting them to move that event from over at the state park to here in Franklin.
Dan, I don't remember, I don't recall all of the events that he took. I do remember that we worked with them real hard to get it to Franklin. In fact, I was on that committee.
Were you?
I was. And I remember at the time we talked about it, they talked about what a good location we were, what a central location we were to a lot of counties, being on 65 and close to Nashville, close to Bowling Green.
Right.
And that was one of the things that brought it here. And we brought it, what we were wanting to do at the time that we talked to them about that, we were just trying to do all we could do to bring things to the downtown location, to keep Franklin alive. And, you know, I want to commend all of our leaders over the years, Dan. Franklin is still a vibrant town. It really is. And I think one of the main reasons we are is because of the work of a lot of hard-working people. And we continue to be a vibrant downtown, and I am really grateful for that. And I hope that Franklin will always have that flavor that we have today. I have enjoyed living here all my life, and truthfully, I would like to see my children come back here someday. I don't know that they will, but I would just like to see them be able to come back to Franklin and still have the downtown atmosphere and feel that we have today.
Well, you know, I think you're right about that. I have occasion in my work to go to the north, and I'm not knocking Cave City or Horse Cave or Munfordville, but their downtowns aren't nearly as vibrant as ours continues to be. And I don't know for sure who gets the credit for that, but somebody must be doing something right, because we don't look like they do. You know, some of those are, well, frankly, it's a little sad, you know.
Well, I remember several years ago we formed a merchants association, and that was the purpose of our association. And I could name a few of those people, but I would hesitate to do that because I'd be afraid I would leave out someone.
Yeah, I understand.
But I was on the original committee, and that was several years ago. And out of the Downtown Merchants Association, Renaissance was started, and also tourism was developed out of that, Dan.
That's right.
So I think because of that, like I say, because of the work of a lot of hard-working people, that's why we are what we are today.
Now, you've spent virtually your entire career with one store. Do you have other people working for you who have been with you for many years? You have anybody approaching your 40-year record? Or?
Well, actually, Fred Briggs is still with me, and Fred has been there 51 years.
Oh, he's got you beat.
He's got me beat. He sure has. Katie Nolan was there many, many years, and in fact, I think 48 or 49 years she was there. Dan, that's another thing. Sullivan's has been successful because of a lot of dedicated employees. I have Patsy Kirby now, who's a very good employee. All the employees I have are good employees. I shouldn't start trying to name them because they all are dedicated and loyal. You can't buy loyalty, Dan. And every employee I have are loyal and dedicated to Sullivan's and to me. And that's another thing that helps keep us there.
Well, Larry, some people, after working for 41 years, might be thinking about retirement, but you look a little too energetic to me to be someone who's thinking about his retirement. So am I right about that?
You are right about that. Retirement is not in my plans. It really isn't. I plan to be at Sullivan's several more years, and if the Lord lets me live. And I don't have a lot of hobbies, but I enjoy my work. I can truly tell you that I get up every day, I go to work, and I enjoy what I do. And I'm a people person, Dan. I love people, and I love working with people, and the store gives me an opportunity to do that. And as long as I'm healthy, I plan to be right there doing what I've done.
Well, now you mentioned earlier Billy Wantlin and having worked with him and then competing against him, and Billy wound up running for public office. Have you ever thought about doing that?
No, sir, I have not. I have not. I probably would not ever do that. If once I retire, I probably will just enjoy a few years of traveling, and I have probably looks like both of my children are going to live away from here, so I'll enjoy visiting them and doing some other things.
Yeah. But most of the time, I expect we'll still find you where we've been finding you for the past 40 years.
I can assure you that.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you. I appreciate you coming in on a work day. And from what you told me about the experience of your staff, I guess it wasn't hard to have someone to mind the store while you came up here. I imagine it was all well in hand. But I'm glad to have the opportunity to kind of reminisce a little bit. And perhaps this opportunity will present itself again someday.
I hope so, and I appreciate you having me, Dan. And I would like to make one comment, if I may. I just want to thank all of the people of Franklin and Simpson County and surrounding counties for the commitment that they have given to me over the years. This town and Simpson County and surrounding counties have been very good to me. Okay. And I hope that whenever it does come time to retire, that I can at least leave something to them. And that's my desire in my workplace, is to leave something good to the people that have been good to me.
That's very nice, and I'm sure almost everyone would agree that you've certainly given a lot back for whatever might have been given to you. So on their behalf, I'll thank you for that. I've been talking with Larry Dixon, who is the owner and the manager of Sullivan's Department Store here in Franklin, and he has been in that job for 41 years, and believe it or not, he's the kid with the least amount of experience of some of the people he's got down there. So it's always good to have a Franklin institution here, and I think Larry would probably qualify for that. So I hope you enjoyed the segment, and this will conclude our program for this week. Of course, depending on when you're watching the program, will be repeating itself throughout the day. And then next week, we'll be back with a brand new set of programming, so hope you'll stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching.